5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to the South Carolina Public Service Commission. We are continuing on case number 2025-247E. I think we have reached a point where we will be having some rebuttal testimony and possibly a closed session. Present in the hearing room is Commissioner Belser, Vice Chair Williams, Commissioner Casting. Joining us virtually is Commissioner Britt, Commissioner Williams, and Commissioner Thomas. Is there anything we need to address before we proceed? All right. Anything from ORS? Okay. Sasiba, I understand you're virtual today. Is that correct?
Chair Powers, yes. Richard Witt for Sasiba, okay. And Bland Holman is also appearing virtually for Sasiba. Thank you.
All right. Well, don't let me forget about you.
Okay.
All right. I think we're about up to your rebuttal.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. The companies would call Mr. Tim Pearson and Heather Shirley Smith to the witness stand.
Mr. Pearson and Ms. Smith, can you raise your right hand? Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Pearson, we'll start with you. Would you please state your name for the record?
Timothy Pearson.
Thank you. And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Corporation as the president of Duke Energy, South Carolina.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 4 pages of rebuttal testimony that were pre-filed with this commission?
Yes.
As explained in your rebuttal testimony, your testimony adopts and incorporates by reference the yellow highlighted sections of the company's reply comments. Is that right?
Yes, I am yellow.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony at this time?
No.
And if I asked you the same questions that were contained within your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that Mr. Pearson's pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Pearson will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Smith, are you the same Heather Shirley Smith that appeared before this commission earlier in this proceeding?
Yes.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 4 pages of pre-filed rebuttal testimony that were filed with this commission on February 6th?
Yes.
And as explained in your rebuttal testimony, your testimony adopts and incorporates by reference the green highlighted sections of the company's reply comments. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that pre-filed rebuttal testimony at this time?
I do. Looking at my Smith Rebuttal Exhibit 1 on page 14, toward the bottom quarter of the page, there's a sentence that says, ORS recommends that the commission reject all of the utility-owned solar projects totaling 150 megawatts. That number is 168 megawatts. So replace 150 with 168.
You know, because some of the commissioners are remote, I want to make sure that microphone is picking up Ms. Smith. I don't know if there's a way to confirm that, but
and Mr. Pearson too, if you could. I was kind of struggling here.
I just want to make sure that everybody's hearing what.
Is this better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And thank you, Ms. Smith. So if I asked you the same questions that were contained within your pre-filed rebuttal testimony subject to that correction, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would ask that Ms. Smith's pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Ms. Smith will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that correction be repeated? I didn't get the right.
Yes, if you would, please repeat it. And of course, we would like a copy, a corrected copy.
Yes, sir.
It would be Smith Rebuttal Exhibit 1. It would be page 14 on the page, but on the top header, it would be page 16 of 35.
Gotcha.
And in the bottom 25% of the page, there's a sentence. It's 5 lines up from the bottom. that says totaling 150 megawatts. It's 168 megawatts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, there was one exhibit, and this was Smith Rebuttal Exhibit 1 that was prepared or caused to be prepared by you that was pre-filed with this commission. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you have any changes to that exhibit at this time?
No, subject to the change I just described.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would ask that Smith Rebuttal Exhibit 1 be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed rebuttal exhibit of witness Smith, identified as Smith Rebuttal Exhibit 1, marked for identification and placed in the record as exhibit number 13.
Thank you, sir. All right. Mr. Pearson and Ms. Smith will have you present your testimony summaries to the commission at this time. Mr. Pearson, we'll start with you. If you could go ahead and present your rebuttal testimony summary.
Thank you. And can you all hear me okay? Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair.
If you want to pull it to you so you don't have to lean over.
That's probably good advice, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you. Good morning. The purpose of my rebuttal testimony today is to adopt and incorporate portions of the company's reply comments highlighted in yellow as my rebuttal testimony in support of the company's 2024 competitive procurement of solar and solar paired with storage program. I want to start by highlighting the results of our 2024 CPRE program and why I believe these results are in the public interest for South Carolina customers. As we explained in our application, the companies identified the need to build new solar and other resources to reliably serve customers through our commission-approved 2023 IRP and confirmed that need through the 2025 IRP update that is currently pending before the commission. The commission has reviewed our two most recent balancing area-wide CPRE programs, the 2022 and 2023 programs, and determined these RFPs, procuring solar and paired storage across our balancing areas in both South Carolina and North Carolina, were reasonable steps for the companies to take to procure the targeted solar resources identified in our IRPs. Like the 2024 RFP, these earlier programs were designed to procure a reasonable balance of ownership between utility-owned projects and third-party owned projects, consistent with South Carolina law. In May 2025, the Energy Security Act became law, establishing through Chapter 42 that it is in the public interest for Duke Energy to implement CPRE programs to competitively procure targeted volumes of renewable energy and co-located energy storage resources identified in our Commission-approved 2023 IRP. The new CPRE program framework directs the procurement of a reasonable balance of utility-owned and third-party solar, and also specifically recognizes the balancing authority area-wide procurement framework that the companies administer to reliably and cost-effectively serve our customers in South Carolina. These requirements are consistent with our prior practice and prior commission approvals, including seeking a reasonable balance of ownership. Through the Energy Security Act, the General Assembly directed the Commission to approve a utilities multi-state CPRE program if the results of such procurement are in the public interest and enable the economic, reliable, and safe operation of the electric grid. As our other application and the witnesses explain, we have done that, and the results of our 2024 CPRE program are in the public interest for South Carolina. ORS has recommended that the Commission reject all of the utility-owned solar-owned projects, including 2 projects that will be sited in South Carolina. ORS's recommendation would result in 100% third-party ownership of solar-owned projects. Instead of holistically evaluating the results of the 2024 CPRE program, which is my understanding of what is required under Act 41, ORS instead engaged in a project-by-project review solely based on individual projects' levelized cost of energy, essentially asking the Commission to reselect winners and losers of the completed procurement and ignoring other statutory considerations, like consistency with the Commission-approved 2023 IRP and ensuring the reliability and safety of our grid. Practically, this leaves a hole in generation identified as needed by this Commission and selected through the CPRE program that ORS has made no proposal to fill. ORS's recommendation does not serve the public interest of South Carolina and creates significant concerns as the companies plan to continue to implement dual state procurements for the benefit of our customers in South Carolina. The Energy Security Act declares the General Assembly's position that the quote, the economic and financial well-being of South Carolina and its citizens depends upon continued economic development and industry retention, end quote. And quote, the availability of clean energy sources for electricity is an important factor in the decision for commercial and industrial entities to locate, expand, and maintain their existing establishments in South Carolina, end quote. The General Assembly also directed the Commission to account in future IRPs for, quote, the efficiencies and optimum plans of our dual state operations in planning to reliably serve our balancing authority area. These provisions of South Carolina law and policy align with our current balancing authority area-wide procurement approach to solar resources, and the General Assembly, in my view, set a clear framework in Section 584220G for the Commission to review the results of each CPR procurement and determine whether it is in the public interest for South Carolina and should continue. The companies have made reasonable and balanced procurement decisions with independent oversight from an independent evaluator that are consistent with South Carolina law. For all of these reasons, I respectfully request that the Commission approve the results of the 2024 CPRE program as outlined in the company's application as in the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Ms. Smith, we'll turn to you. Could you please, for the Commission, present your rebuttal testimony summary?
Sure. And good morning. And also thank you for allowing us to be here today. The purpose of my rebuttal testimony is to adopt and incorporate by reference portions of the company's reply comments that are highlighted in green. These sections respond to the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff's comment letter filed on December 5th, 2025. My rebuttal testimony challenges the recommendation presented in ORS's comment letter to reject all utility-owned solar-only projects and instead procure 100% third-party solar-only resources. As a threshold matter, the companies designed the RFP with two distinct evaluation tracks, one for utility-owned resources, another for third-party-owned resources, in an effort to achieve a reasonable balance of utility-owned and third-party-owned projects, as Act 41 requires, and just as we did in the 22 and 23 procurements approved by the Commission. ORS's evaluation of the procurement, merely comparing the LCOE of third-party projects to those of utility-owned resources, ignores important policy priorities set by the General Assembly and the Energy Security Act, namely that utilities seek a reasonable balance of third-party and utility ownership, the procurement must be consistent with the IRP, and the state of South Carolina should take steps necessary to encourage the development of diverse mix of long-lead clean generation resources, and that utilities IRPs approved by the commissions are a key consideration, a codified consideration, to the objective of meeting customers' capacity and energy needs, among other policy priorities applicable to the CPRE. In ignoring these policy priorities and focusing only on cost, I believe that the ORS isolates a single consideration and then misapplies it. In comparing the cost of third-party owned projects to utility-owned projects, the ORS, I believe, does not adequately consider the differences between the two tracks and thus compares apples to oranges. The ORS proposal of 100% third-party ownership and zero utility ownership for solar-only resources is not a reasonable balance. It is an unreasonable balance. We do not believe that the ORS position achieves the requirements and objectives in the Energy Security Act. Taken together, the rebuttal testimony of the company's witnesses establish that the overall results of the 2024 CPRE are economic, given that the LCOE for the portfolio of winners was 1% lower than the solar reference cost, which reflects the assumed cost of solar resources in the 2023 IRP. Both the utility and third-party ownership tracks of the procurement were competitive, with third parties bidding into both tracks through either asset transfer or build-own transfer arrangements. LCOEs for utility-owned and third-party resources are not directly comparable, and attempts to directly compare them are improper and can be misleading as explained by the independent evaluator. Two resource types are two different products. A utility-owned solar project that will operate over 35 years has different costs and a different risk profile than a third-party owned solar-only resource designed to meet the performance requirements of a 25-year contract. ORS did not appropriately evaluate the system reliability and safety risks of an imbalanced ownership allocation, creating significant and unnecessary risks for the company's customers in contravention of South Carolina policy. And we also believe that ORS ignores the current and historical attrition of third-party projects, 65% attrition between 2018 and 2022, which create risks that needed resources may never materialize. The 2024 CPRE procured a reasonable balance of utility and third-party owned solar-only resources, approximately half and half, consistent, we believe, with South Carolina law and policy set forth in the Energy Security Act, and that appropriately balances cost, risk, and operational flexibility to ensure greater system reliability. General Assembly expressed a policy in favor of procuring a reasonable balance of utility and third-party owned resources, and ORS's proposal to procure 100% of third-party solar-only resources is not balanced or reasonable and ignores the different attributes of each type. Rejecting the utility-owned solar projects also creates a resource gap that conflicts with Act 41's mandate to procure resource volumes consistent with the utility's resource needs presented in the company's most recent IRP and the Commission's order approving the 2023 IRP. ORS's recommendation ignores the reliability risks that are amplified by selecting 100% third-party owned resources. Utilities like DEC and DEP have a federally mandated obligation to ensure the reliability of the electric grid 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The same cannot be said for third-party generators. The companies have no control or insight into the future financial viability of third-party owned resources and must bear the risk of unexpected termination. Indeed, the companies are currently working to address risks created by the recently announced bankruptcy of Pinegate. This unforeseen disruption underscores the danger of outsourcing all solar-only resources, as the company has no control and the Commission has no oversight over the solvency of third parties, which may be heavily leveraged. ORS suggests that any reliability or safety concerns related to third-party ownership can be addressed simply through contractual provisions. I do not agree with that. While third-party solar is valuable to the system, relying on third-party assets is not the same as relying on the utility's own assets, which bring with it the oversight and regulation provided by the Commission. ORS's recommendation does not appropriately consider fuel cost volatility, which is mitigated by solar, and that is a major attribute of our procurements, both third-party and utility-owned. But that benefit is more likely to come to the grid to support the reliable and safe operation of the grid when solar resources are owned and operated by the utility. In short, the companies have demonstrated that their balancing area-wide 2024 CPRE, we believe, is in the public interest and enables the economic, reliable, and safe operation of the grid, which is what the General Assembly set out in the Energy Security Act. For all the reasons I've explained and explained through the company's application and testimony, the companies respectfully request that the Commission issue an order approving the results of the 2024 CPRE.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Chair, Mr. Pearson and Ms. Smith are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from SECIBA?
No questions for SECIBA, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. Any questions from ORS?
No questions from RS.
All right. Commissioner questions. Commissioner Belson.
Oh, no.
No questions.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Vice Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, sir. Good morning, Mr. Pearson and Ms. Smith.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate you all being here. I just want to start off by saying that I think sometimes as humans, we just take things for granted. I found that in this role, reliability sometimes is taken for granted and it's not appreciated until there's an outage. I think sometimes the obligation that the utility has to provide service, it may not necessarily be taken for granted as much as maybe it's just not really understood. I think the roles of ORS and the roles of the Commission, those different roles sometimes are taken for granted. But here we have the opportunity to just work through some of the issues that are presented and try to get a better understanding. And based on where we are now in this hearing, what appears to me as a primary issue here in this case is the Office of Regulatory Staff's question about the cost, and in their mind, the unexplained cost of utility-owned solar versus third-party PPAs. And I understand you all's position. You laid it out very plainly. And I understand, based on their role representing the public interest, why they would ask that question. And I appreciate them asking that question. They see something, so they're saying something and bringing it to our attention. What I would like for you all to do is to unpack, and you've done some of it with your summaries, but unpack the benefits to ratepayers of utility-owned solar in a way that the average person could understand. Because, I'm just going to add a little bit more commentary. You all are humans just like we're humans. You read the newspapers. I would imagine you may listen to the news on television or TV or podcast, whatever. But affordability is an issue. And I would just like to give you the opportunity to unpack the benefits of utility-owned solar versus third-party PPAs, even if it may appear to cost more on its face.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I really appreciate the question because, and witness Smith may have some, more granular detail that she can add to this that I think might provide some more color. Because, frankly, not only were we maybe expecting this question, we were hoping for it. The way affordability is an issue that exists, in our society at large, right? And it's not just electric prices. And so, we talk to our customers all the time. We do watch the news, and balancing for us, the ability and our consistent desire to keep, the cost of our service as low as possible with, the obligation that we have to serve. That's the biggest challenge we face, I think, every day. And it's probably that balance is the thing that we take most seriously, from top to bottom at Duke Energy. And you're right. It's hard to feel the benefits of reliability. Sometimes I think about it. If I have Amazon Prime and I watch it with ads, and I don't like that, I can pay $5 more, and there's a tangible benefit to me. I am now watching Amazon Prime, and there are no ads. I paid $5 more, and now I don't have ads, and that works for me. And if I don't want to pay it and I don't mind the ads, I can go back. Your lights don't get brighter when the cost goes up, and so that's hard for people to understand, and I get it. I mean, it was hard for me to understand before I came to Duke Energy, right? So, I guess that's how I would frame it. When it comes to the benefits of utility-owned, Witness Smith talked about Uber versus, owning your own car, and I think that's important. But there are a couple other things, and, they're not qualitative all the time, right? It's hard to put a number. And I think part of the conversation that was had around, is there anybody else who is actually creating a study or a formula that puts it? I think the answer to that is no. I'm not aware of any, because they're not quantitative things, but they are very real, right? And so, when we think about utility owned, third-party solar is a tremendous asset. We are very grateful for our partners, but it's not the same. And there are various things that we can do with utility-owned solar, some of them that we have to do, some of them that we can do, that make it beneficial to the system as a whole. For example, when we own something, we can change it with your oversight and, at need. And I have a great deal of confidence in kind of the, technological advances that this country is producing. But if those things come on board, we can change them at our systems, at our own facilities in a way that we can't, for third parties. So, for example, ultimately, solar will become more valuable as a reliable asset if the storage capacity of batteries becomes longer, right? The biggest challenge for solar is that, you can't store it overnight, right? So that becomes an issue in the winter when the sun's been down and the morning is the greatest challenge to the grid. That solar doesn't exist, right? And so if we get to a place, and it's continually happening, where folks are investing tremendous amounts of time and intellectual capital in extending the storage lifeline of a battery. If we get to a place, and I hope and expect at some point we will, where we can store solar overnight, that dramatically changes its usefulness to us. If we have I expect, I'm not an expert, that sometime in the life of these plants these facilities we're talking about, that will happen. When we own it, we can do that, right? We can add that capability to our own plant and all of a sudden turn it into something that's a lot more dispatchable in our times of greatest need. We can't do that. We can't force a third party partner to do that. They may not have the capital to do that. They may not want to do that. And all of a sudden that benefit that exists through technological advancement doesn't exist on those things. That's one example. A second example, and I think I have three if you'll let me walk through them, is the General Assembly in Act 41 has littered the bill with references to the importance of the grid in economic development. And it also acknowledges specifically around renewables the importance to some companies and customers of having the availability of renewable resources. And when we get calls from the Commerce Department or the governor's office or whoever it is involved in these projects, they ask us, this company wants to come here and they want you to be able to guarantee them clean energy. This is part of their corporate goals. These are things that are, some of them it's in their, company mission, for example. Can you guarantee that? My answer to them will be different and is different if it's utility owned versus third party. And that's not because I don't trust, our partners and believe we wouldn't select them as partners if we didn't, but I don't know. I know that if we own it, that it will run. We may have challenges, we may have to invest money in it, but it will run because we have an obligation to do that. That is not true for a third-party partner. ORS has kind of made the argument that we can contractually protect ourselves from that, and that is true until it's not. The finances, I don't know the finances of our third-party partners, but 25 years is a long time. Investments will have to be made in those facilities over those 25 years. I don't know at what point the equation for them flips, and when the investments that they need to make to continue to produce that energy no longer outweigh, the cost of that becomes higher than the profit based on our contract that will go on going forward. And I don't blame them for that. I mean, they're a business, but there may become a point in which, the capital investment that they would have to make in order to continue to provide that electric is more expensive than the liquidated damages that the contract has. And so they may be making a business decision, which they have every right to do, that it is appropriate for them to not make that investment, to walk away from delivering the megawatts and pay the liquidated damages because that costs them less than making the investment. I don't know that. I don't have control over that. That doesn't mean that all of them will do that, and it doesn't mean we don't value them, but it does mean that my level of confidence, to the governor when he calls me, when we have a balance of utility-owned solar that we control and an obligation to keep those megawatts on the system is, I can say that yes, I can answer that question yes, for certainty, and that customer of ours, that economic development prospect who is likely investing, they'll be here for the long term, can have confidence that we can deliver on what we promised them. So that's the second one. The third point, I think, is similarly veined about, the financing component of third parties, but I think it's real. And I was trying to think about how can I do this in a way that kind of brings home. So this isn't a solar asset that I'm going to talk about, and it's not South Carolina. But if you think about one of the greatest, in my view, kind of reliability crises that we've seen on the electric grid in this country over the last I don't know if it was 5 years ago or maybe longer, time flies, but was what happened in Texas when we had the winter storm, which was devastating. I mean, people lost their lives, right? And that doesn't even factor in the electric costs that people had to pay. And I don't know it all, deeply, but I've read a lot about it. And, and this is not a negative characterization of their grid, but a lot of their generation assets were not utility owned, right? They don't have a vertically integrated utility. So those generation assets, they had no obligation to serve, right? They were third party assets. And my understanding is some of them ultimately made the decision, and I don't blame them, but they'd invested money, they'd received, value from their investment. But winterizing those plants was probably not the best paper financial decision, right? It doesn't snow that often. We don't have a lot of ice storms in Dallas, right? And winterizing a plant is an expensive proposition. And so, ultimately that was a decision they didn't make. Well, it's not something that happens often, but it did. And, the consequences of that, I think we all saw on the news. We don't have the option to not winterize our facilities. We don't have the option to make a cost-benefit analysis to us as a company based on profits as to whether or not it makes sense for us to ensure the reliability in any scenario. We have to do it. You tell us we have to do it. The law tells us we have to do it. If we don't do it, we have to answer to you. We have to answer to the General Assembly, in addition to answering to our customers. And so those are kind of three ways in which I think the value of utility-owned solar is again, not quantitative, but very, very real. And that's why the differences in those assets, which I think at the core this is about, they're not the same, is really important. We can have some that are third party that is maybe a slightly lower cost, but we don't have the level of confidence that every time we need them, they will be there. And we have some that may be slightly higher, and I think Ms. Smith at some point today will have the opportunity to talk about what that means, but are more reliable, and we have more confidence that they'll be there. And so, that situation where people really understand the value of reliability is where it's not there, that's less likely to happen. So I hope that answered your question in some regard.
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I think another good place to look is Section 3 of the application that was adopted as comments. We have a lot there, but before I add to Mr. Pearson's comments, I just want to say I remember being in this room a couple of years ago when we had purchase power that did not show up when we needed it. So this is a real risk. I don't think we can understate the importance of having the megawatts you need when you need them. And I'm very concerned about not having 160 megawatts when we need them. There's been some discussion about whether they're capacity or not, but our system runs on capacity and energy. And as Tim said, they do help charge batteries. Not as long, we hopeful technology will get us to a longer time, but they do help with capacity by charging batteries. But we've been in a situation where we didn't have what we needed, and the throat to choke was us. There was no throat to choke outside of this hearing room because the entity that did not deliver is not regulated by this commission. And so I don't ever want to be in that situation again. And we had some real hot days this summer where, but for our neighbors, we would have been in trouble. This is no secret. We've all been talking about in the state the need to add megawatts to the grid. And I don't want to think about that summer in 29 when we made decisions today that mean we have less solar then when we need it on August heat wave 3 p.m. and our neighbors are going through the same situation. So I think there is no value great enough to place on having power there when you need it. And there are sections of the country that don't. So I think that's the most important thing to talk about in terms of the benefits of utility-owned solar balanced against the risk of third parties. We also don't know we know our partners today. We don't know our partners tomorrow. 25 years is a long time. Projects change hands, contracts change hands, and all of that will be done outside of the commission's purview. We come in here in rate cases, we come in here answering for outages in fuel cases, and we come in here accountable to the commission and our customers when we have something that doesn't go right. And frankly, we have consequences for that. That does not exist outside of this hearing room with third parties. We can contract for financial penalties. We can contract for things like that, but it comes back to, I think, the throat to choke, and we've got the throat. And so as we exercise that responsibility, I also think it's important to know that while we do believe in third-party solar, we are not looking to outsource our obligation to serve. It is ours. And so we believe that we can balance the risks of third-party solar, but appropriately balanced with the solar that we bring to the table. I would also say in that section 3 of the application, there's it's about 10 pages, but it talks about the need to fill the megawatts that our IRP and our resource plans have determined are necessary along with the growth to match the increasing resources with the increasing growth in the state. We also talked a little bit at the start about greater utility control. We have greater curtailability rights with our own solar. Sometimes you can have not enough solar, sometimes you can have too much solar. And our ability to control and ramp up and back down when we need those resources is incredibly beneficial for the system and aids to reliability of the grid. So I think I've talked about oversight. I think we also have a lot more experience when it comes to end-of-life issues, when we think about decommissioning and taking plants out of service and that kind of thing. Tim talked about technology evolutions. And then the other thing is I think we've talked about the attrition rate of third-party solar. And again, this isn't an indictment of the industry. There's been a lot going on. But when we look at the significant amount of attrition and then we look out over the balance of when we're going to need megawatts, I think there the benefits are really clear. So I hope I know that was a really long answer, but man, it's an important issue, and thank you for asking those questions.
It wasn't long to me at all. I mean, we're here for the hearing, so if you have this to every witness, please take your time, because once the chair adjourns, it's over at that point. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any further commissioner questions? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. I want to say to my colleague, Vice Chair Williams, you have a knack for asking a question that
Commissioner Williams,
yes.
could you speak up a little bit?
Yes.
Or pull your microphone closer.
I can't do that, but I can turn up the volume. How's that?
Thank you very much.
Okay. I wanted to start by thanking my colleague, Vice Chair Williams, for his regular knack for asking succinct questions that get to the heart of the issue, and thank the witnesses for their answer, which led me to ask a question I wasn't even thinking about. So given the value of utility-owned solar, what is the value of the independent PPAs to the system? Could you go back and do a little summarization of that?
Sure, I'll start and I'll let Heather talk a little bit more about it. It's a great question. I think, diversity is a good thing, right, generally on our system. It's something that you've heard us talk about time and time again, certainly in the IRP, and I think this language is in the Energy Security Act, this idea of all of the above. And one thing that I think is important to remember, and I think may have been lost a little bit in the back and forth, and then some of the comments from ORS is just because the fuel of an asset is the same does not mean the asset is the same, right? And so all solar is not the same just because the fuel comes from the sun, just like all gas resources are not the same just because the fuel comes from natural gas. And I think, to Commissioner, the Vice Chair's question about balancing affordability, we have a different financing structure at Duke Energy than some of our third-party friends have. They can be more leveraged. They just have a different construct than we do, which does two things. One, it often makes it easier for them to provide a lower cost, as we've heard a number of times from ORS on the levelized cost of energy. But than we do. But it also, I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that Duke Energy is not going bankrupt anytime soon, right? I don't know that about some of our partners. And so that's the balance, right? So maybe slightly lower cost, although I think, again, we may have some opportunity later from some of the other witnesses to talk about what that actually means. But that's a good thing, right? I mean, we want to provide electricity to our customers at a lower cost. We just don't want it all to be in that one asset that is financed and behaves that same way, so that we don't have the balance that we need in order to get all the benefits of the utility-owned solar for our grid that, again, may be slightly higher on the cost side, but are exceptionally important. So I think, I don't know that either resource would be good if it was the entirety of the way that we went through this RFP. And I think, frankly, that's why the General Assembly was very specific that we need a reasonable balance. They recognize that these are different assets and that there are benefits and that there are challenges with both, and that having this be done in aggregate helps enhance the benefits and mitigate the challenges.
I would also add just a little more granularly that when we look at third-party solar, it also frees up capital for us. We are in a build cycle, and being able to get the benefit of third-party solar with less capital resources from us, that's good for us. It's good for customers. It frees up capital for some of our larger projects. So that is also a benefit of third-party solar. But again, there's a balance to that. Another benefit of third-party solar procured in this way, because we talked about third-party solar and utility-owned solar within the procurement as being two different products. The third product is PURPA solar. And so there is more value in third-party solar procured in the way we're doing it than in PURPA projects where you have really no curtailability ability, outside of a really egregious system emergency. And we have more rights with the system. We have more ways to protect customers and capture that value through this procurement. So that's another benefit to the third-party solar procured through this arrangement. So they're both valuable, and Commissioner Williams, I hope we answered your questions on the benefits of third-party solar.
You did, and Witness Smith, learned a lot from you over the years, but throat to choke is the latest one. So thank you for adding that. I'm going to switch gears and ask about Section 4 of your January 12th reply. The copy I got did not have any highlights on it, and I have a suspicion as to why that was the case, but I just wanted to ask you all if anybody was adopting Section 4 of the January 12th reply comments.
I think that was Mr. Wellborn's, the guts of Mr. Wellborn's oral argument.
That was my guess.
Happy to answer any policy questions related to it, but that was the intent.
Okay. Well, I'm going to dance around that area, so we'll see where we get with that. So I want to ask a question that I've asked earlier, so you're probably expecting it, and it has to do with how we generally are encouraged to avoid cost subsidization, and how do we look at one group of customers and another group of customers when they're in two different states and cost subsidization? And I understand the dual state system, balancing system, but I'll get to the question, but I know, Ms. Smith, we've been in this place before where you're asking for something, but you want the company also has a reason to kind of understand reasonably if you're going to be able to recover your cost. And the way I understand this law and this question, we are addressing the process that you went through and the benefits that are coming from it. So I guess I have multiple questions. One is there such a thing as cost subsidization between the two states where where it is reliant on a law in another state? There's question one.
In this procurement, there is no cost subsidization because we believe that the policies of the state align. So this was, we have reasonable balance in South Carolina law that we're supposed to get a reasonable balance of third-party owned and PPA. Reasonable balance is what we've said for years is around 50-50 to us. And the North Carolina law that was mentioned is 55-45. And so that seems really aligned to us. So our view is that there is no cost subsidization, particularly since one of the other benefits of the dual state procurement is that we have a much larger area to procure solar from, meaning we have a wider array of projects to pick from. There have been other dockets where we have different conversations about are there differences between North Carolina law and South Carolina law, but we don't think that that is present here because we have policies that align between the states, and so we don't see any cross-subsidization stemming from this docket.
And Commissioner, I really appreciate the question, and Heather's exactly right. But you commended the vice chair for getting to asking questions that got to the heart of some things, and I think this does as well. So if I may, I might answer it kind of more broadly because certainly the issue of North Carolina law was it's been maybe less present in the ORS commentary here in this hearing, but it is littered throughout their testimony, and I would say broadly, the dual state system provides tremendous benefit to South Carolinians, and that was a very long conversation that we had with the members of the General Assembly in the process of the Energy Security Act, because I think in some respects it took some convincing of them, but they were convinced, and I think that's why the law is littered with support of the dual state system and the references to the balancing authority area. And I could go through all the benefits, whether it's our nuclear fleet or I know that's not the question that you asked, but for me, and I know it's true for Heather too, our North Star in the South Carolina President's organization here is every question that comes before us, we have to answer first and foremost, does this comply with South Carolina law, and is it in the best interest of our customers? There is not an issue, and I'm here under oath, there is not an issue that we have, a meeting that I have with our colleagues across the enterprise where we're making decisions about what we're going to do, whether that is not the first consideration that we have. And, the benefits of the dual state system are significant, but that doesn't mean it's not complicated. I will be very honest with you. My job would be easier day to day if we did not have it. But to me, it's worth fighting for because it really helps our customers. So there are times when it is complicated. I do not see this as one of those times. The two laws are not the same word for word, but they are effectively, we heard a lot from ORS about the plain reading of words earlier this week. I don't know how you can say that the plain reading of the words is somehow substantially different between the South Carolina law and North Carolina law. But I will tell you, we followed South Carolina law in this docket. We followed the process that has been laid out by the law and by this commission. And, part of my I remember earlier on Tuesday, Commissioner Belzer used the word dismayed, and I understand why. You know, part of me, the fact that we're here having this conversation is a little bit dismaying to me because, you know, if you go back to the Energy Security Act process, the question that was posed to us is, how do we get megawatts on the grid, and what do you guys need from us as the policymakers in this state to make that something that you can accomplish? And what I said and what we all said to them was, we just need clarity and processes that we can understand. You can tell us to do almost anything, and if we know what you're asking us to do, we can do it. We may not think it's the best way to do it, but we do not set the laws and the policy of this state. And when I think about this particular process, that clarity exists in the law. That clarity exists in the precedent. You know, you go through an IRP, you go through a process that's consistent with the IRP, and then you go and build, you know, your assets, and you provide megawatts to the grid, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. And we have done that, and we've done it consistent with South Carolina law at every single step of the way. And so that's again another, you know, expansive way to answer your question about, is there cross subsidization? The answer to that is definitively no. But also it's something I'm very sensitive to because we think about it all the time.
Thank you. And the other part of my question is, or the other question I hinted at that I'll ask now is, you know, we've had the conversations before about what if it's determined the costs that you're incurring are not prudent? We've had conversations about the desire to understand that now before you're making the investment. Is that a concern to you?
I think Mr. Salter had some comments yesterday or I guess it was Tuesday that I agree with. That the way I took his comments, I'll just give my own opinion, but I think we're in the same place on this. What has changed from our prior CPREs is now Act 41 has codified really the process that we used in those prior CPREs, even down to the term reasonable balance, but also that clarity that Tim mentioned. We feel like we will get exiting this process. So when the commission, as we read it, if the commission approves this procurement is in the public interest and contributing to safe, reliable, and economic energy to the grid, we will have a very good idea of cost recovery because in this proceeding, the commission's determining what's appropriate for South Carolina customers. Now, what happens after this proceeding, if costs go up on the utility owned, if there's some sort of contractual change that requires costs to go up on the third party side, I think that is something that will require more analysis and more discussion because that wouldn't have been part of this proceeding. But coming up to this proceeding, we feel like we will exit this proceeding understanding how these resources would be allocated or not between North Carolina and South Carolina. And I think the other thing in considering all of this is we never agreed with the delta described between Mr. Salter's examination of what the price could have otherwise been. We don't think that delta is that big. Looking at step 2 projects before they had transmission cost, you don't even know if they're coming to the grid. That created such a big wide comparison that I understand if you look at it that way that there's sticker shock. I think if you wind up looking at it in terms of other projects, what was actually available to pick, what was still in the running, and what prices were that is a better measure of what the gap is. But we don't believe the gap, and we explained this before, but we don't believe the gap that Mr. Salter identified is the appropriate way to look at it, if you want to look at it at all.
Thank you. All of that is helpful and responsive. And it may feel like I'm circling in on the very same thing. And so, but I still want to ask this question and hear your response. ORS on page 12 of their December 5th letter has a recommendation in that last paragraph, which Mr. Salter did bring up in discussion. And it's really the same question. It's a piece of the same question that we were just talking about. And of course, I'm not turning to it right now, but do you have their December 5th recommendation?
Is this their, let's see here. Is this their direct reply? I've gotten a little mixed up on my dates.
It is.
Got it.
Commissioner, I think it's their review letter that you're referencing.
Well, it's December the
Yeah.
5th. Yes, I think
got
you're
it.
right, Chair.
What
Commissioner
page?
Belzer.
What page, Commissioner? Are you?
It's page 12. It's their last page, and it starts out finally South Carolina Code, Section 58-4, Title 58-42-20G permits the companies, and I won't read it, but are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what it recommends is that any costs related to the proposals, and I am reading now, contained in the 2024 RFP, ORS will review said cost in applicable rate setting process. The annual FAC review for the PPAs or a general rate case for utility owned resources. The actual results of any resource procurement process conducted by the companies to evaluate the reasonableness and prudency of the selected resource. What is the company's response to that? And I feel like I've read it and I need you to point me to it in writing, in addition to the words you might have here.
I don't know exactly where it is in our reply comments, but I definitely have an answer to it. And it's very similar to what I just described. And that is, what is being determined? What will the commission determine? The commission will determine if this procurement is in the public interest and those other factors and appropriate for South Carolina. So when we walk away with the bid cost, we have, an expectation, because the General Assembly said that the cost from the procurement, if approved, shall be recoverable in rates. So I view there's reference to those rate-making statutes as not if they will be recoverable, but where they will be recoverable. And I think we will still have questions on what changed from the date of the Commission's order. Did prices change? Did we execute on those projects appropriately? And I think that will entail a prudency review. But I don't think it goes back to zero. I think the starting point is the Commission's order coming out of these dockets, and that is what the cost shall be recoverable means to us.
I'm looking at my notes, but thank you for that answer and those references to the order, the date of the order. I think that I may have one other question, but I really do appreciate it, and it's good to have this exchange. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, could I follow up on that a little bit?
Sure, Commissioner Bells.
Ms. Smith, with your last answer, is this an accurate or maybe an oversimplification? What's the difference between if the Commission were to approve this here and cost recovery later, whether it's in a fuel case or in a rate case? What's the difference between this, what we're doing now, and a siting case where the Commission were to approve build of a generation asset, where you have to come back in later and get the actual approval for those prudently incurred costs that went into that build? Is that kind of a analogy?
It is a good analogy, and they're different. The shall be recoverable language is not present in the Siting Act. That's a different burden. The shall be recoverable included in Act 41 sets up if we have procured what we needed to procure. It lines up with the IRP or better, as ours is. If it was a procurement that was done appropriately, if it achieves a reasonable balance, if the procurement adds, if there was resources from the procurement add to the safety, reliability, and economic operation of the grid, we view those as the projects coming out of this procurement have already been deemed to be in the interest of South Carolina customers.
And I understand that, but what I'm talking about is the level. If everything goes off the rails and things aren't done timely, and there's no good reason for cost increases, some of those costs might be rejected.
Absolutely.
That's where I'm getting at. It's not approving the actual cost at this time, because those are still going to have to go through a review at the appropriate proceeding.
Right. And I think we would carry with us, the bid prices and the order in this docket as supportive of cost recovery. But I think absolutely whatever happens after the date of the order, we're on the hook to explain in a rate case. And I don't believe it eliminates any sort of discovery opportunity to look under the hood of what we did on the projects, what did change, et cetera. But the ultimate decision to move forward with the procurement and these projects, that's what we would take from the commission's order in this case, and have a reasonable expectation that we would recover those costs, provided we prudently executed and could explain any differences in a rate case. And there may
It's
be,
not a blank check.
it's not a blank check.
That's what I'm getting at.
It is not a blank check.
Okay.
Commissioner, I am well outside of, or well beneath Heather's area of level of expertise on this. But one way that we've been talking about the construct that Act 41 has created internally to help folks understand is that it's almost like a regulatory circle of life, right? And it kind of goes around. And at each point, it might accelerate, our comfort that we can recover the cost. But at no point until we actually get a rate case order that says we can, does it say yes we can, right? So this moves us forward and helps us believe that the investments we make, y'all at the commission believe are in the right direction. But it doesn't ultimately say we can recover it until you say we can recover it.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all's responses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further Commissioner Cass?
Chair Powers.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, is that?
Commissioner Thomas, can you hear me?
You have the floor, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Let me start out by saying Commissioner Belser asked most of my questions, but I do have a different question, and this is primarily directed to Mr. Pearson. You had mentioned the dual state system, and you said something to the effect that it brings significant benefits to South Carolina. And I just would like to ask you, would you agree that South Carolina brings significant benefits to the system as well, and to North Carolina?
Absolutely. I frankly think South Carolina brings benefits to almost everything that we're involved in, whether it's in the dual state system or elsewhere. But yes, absolutely. It is a what's the word? It is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Absolutely.
And would you touch on some of the benefits that you believe that South Carolina brings to the dual state system, please?
Sure. I think first and foremost, having a large customer base gives us the opportunity to, it's economies of scale, right? We can make things, we can do more things, and we can lower the costs for our customers here. And so ultimately, I think that there is a reason that our rates are lower than the national average here on the Duke Energy system. And I think the dual state system plays a big role in that. And there are lots of intricacies into that. I think about energy efficiency programs, which are massively important in both the reliability component of our system and affordability, right? If we can use less megawatts, that helps the reliability of the system, right? It takes some of the stress off of it. And so that's a good thing. But if our customers are energy efficient, they spend less money on their electricity because they use less and their bills are lower. That's a massive benefit to our customers. When we have the ability to spread the energy efficiency actions that we're taking and programs that we use across the system, they're more effective and they're more efficient. I think that the biggest reason that the best two utilities in the Southeast at energy efficiency are Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress. And I believe, I have a lot of faith in my colleagues, but B, I think the dual state system is a huge component of that. I also think about the assets that we have. I hear a lot, there's a lot of excitement in this state about, the future of nuclear, but the past of nuclear in South Carolina is so incredibly beneficial to this state. And, the 6 nuclear reactors we have in the state, I think if you look at it fairly, I'm not sure that we have the customer base without the dual state system at Duke Energy in South Carolina to absorb the costs. We would have had the customer base to absorb the costs of building that. I do not believe that we have the customer base just in South Carolina to absorb the cost of building a new nuclear plant. Frankly, there's a lot of chatter about what's going to happen, and y'all probably know more about what happened at VC Summer than I do. But the fraud that happened there was, awful, and people went to jail, and it made the failure of that project worse than it would have been for the people of this state. But the fraud is not why the project failed. The fraud happened because the project failed. It happened because ultimately it became increasingly more and more expensive than they expected to do. And they recognized that the customer base here in South Carolina could not bear the ultimate expense of that project. At the flip side, in Georgia, it got more and more expensive. They have a much broader customer base. They were able to power through that. Now, they may not appreciate the bills that they're getting now. I don't know. I don't live in Georgia, but that's the biggest difference. The fraud made it worse, and but the project failed, and then the fraud happened. The fraud didn't happen, and then the project failed. So those are some of the benefits, Commissioner. And again, I think the benefits are enough that the system is worth fighting for, even when it makes some things a little bit more complicated on a day-to-day basis.
Commissioner, I would just add it also helps with financing. We have historically been able to achieve very, very favorable interest rates for our customers, and that derives from the strength of and the size of our system. And so that is a very tangible way that customers benefit. I would also say that the economic development engine that exists within our dual state system has helped bring a lot of industry and a lot of jobs to South Carolina. And a lot of times, certainly some of the prospects that I've talked to appreciate the expanse of our system, and the ones I've talked to, ask a lot of the questions that you would think they would about reliability, about all of the different assets that we have, how we operate our system, what they can count on, what happens if there's a bad day. And we have a lot of those resources, whether they're generation or transmission or human resources, to step in when there's a bad day. And so that's one of the sort of the size and scale type of benefits that Mr. Pearson was talking about.
Okay, and so I guess one of the things that I didn't hear explicitly stated is that basically the nuclear generation in South Carolina is very beneficial to North Carolina. Would both of you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yes, for sure. I think, again, it's a mutually beneficial thing. And if I'm leaving you with the impression that South Carolina is the only one that benefits from this, that is absolutely not true. we have 11 nuclear plants across the system. North Carolina is a larger state than South Carolina. We have more nuclear reactors in South Carolina. I think there's reasons for that, and we're very proud of it here.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Any further, Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, and still morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, what I think I've heard from Ms. Smith, and Mr. Salter was asked, I think, a similar question yesterday. In your response to Commissioner Belcher relative to, I guess, the cost and if it could be reviewed later and such as that. But what I think I've heard, and I want to see if that's the case, is that, you know, if it complies with the IRP, if it's in the IRP, and it goes through the CPR process, and once the commission issues an order, whatever that is, that whatever the determination of the cost were in the CPRE, whatever that is, that at a minimum would be the number. While it wouldn't be a blank check, it would be the number issued, paid to the bearer, basically. Is that true or false?
The number that comes out of this order, we would take as indicia that the resources we were procuring that have not been executed yet, but the resources we are procuring are in the public interest of South Carolina, and that we would be able to recover them based on what we know today under the statute. Now, there's going to be a long road in between what is procured and then what is executed, what is brought on the system, what happens in between now and that date. And so I think we'll have to answer for all of the costs. How did we do? What came on the system? Did we execute prudently? Did we continue to make prudent decisions? But we do think that the Commission's order coming out of this is meaningful, and that is why the language is in the statute to begin with, because it's not in every statute that we have.
Understand. Here's what I'm trying to understand, because all I can go on is just kind of what I know from experience of, you know, trying to determine what we were going to have to budget for, where we need to issue bonds and such as that. After this CPRE process, what the company has gone through, hypothetical number, for these projects, it's going to be $1 billion. That's the number we've derived from our CPRE process. How detailed that is, I guess that's an RFP process. That's what you say, that folks that are going to provide the units, the equipment, the construction, the property, whatever it is, that's it. That's what the CPRE process has said. Is that correct?
The South Carolina share coming out of this process is around $296 million.
I think. Are you trying? Let me try and help. If I'm trying to understand, are you saying, okay, if we come in and this says we can spend $1 billion on this, are you trying to make sure that, let's say things go and they become cheaper, and it costs $900 million if we did it the right way, but we still spend $1 billion? Do we have the opportunity to look at that and make sure that ratepayers only pay the $900 million and not the $1 billion, and this doesn't authorize us to be loose or overspend? Or is that kind of what we're
No, but that's a good question.
Okay.
So go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, we still have to be prudent in our expenses as we go through this, so we can't overspend or be loose in this. This doesn't authorize us to go and spend whatever it is that you authorize us to if it's not appropriate.
And we would know that how?
through the rate case proceeding.
Okay. And if I understood Mr. Salter yesterday when he was asked a question, I think relative to, okay, in a rate case, would ORS be able to, I wish I'd looked it up and read exactly what he said. What I heard from ORS via Mr. Salter was that kind of once this is approved, that it would be extremely difficult in a rate case proceeding to say, no, those were not reasonable or prudent costs.
I think absent missing an opportunity for lower costs, or if costs wind up being greater, then, you know, y'all didn't see, if costs wind up being greater, y'all didn't see those. Like we're on the hook just as if you'd never seen anything for that delta in between what the bid price is and what that resulting cost is, you know, up or down. Now the contracts are probably going to be what the contracts are, absent, you know, maybe things we don't know about today, but it is a baseline. We do think that what we're walking out of here with, if you approve a CPRE, I mean, we think that's what the statute says, is that this establishes a baseline for those future rate proceedings.
And that, in essence, answers my question. Whatever the CPRE says that number is, if it's ideal and everything goes exactly as planned, you know, the quotes, everything, that will be the bottom line. That will be the number.
But I do think we have to justify why that number, like how we spent to that number, right? You know, it's not that, you know, we file an application and we say, the commission and the CPRE offered us to spend $1 billion. We spent $1 billion. You have to give it back to us, right? You know, that I don't think that's how, right? So, you know, that's what we think the cost will be now. If the commission approves it, that's what's in the order. We will go, but we still, you know, if the price goes up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. It's not a blank check that we can spend that money irrespective of the other factors that go into it, right?
Understand, but not a blank check. You necessarily couldn't go over it, but you could go to it. If it's $1 billion, that's what's approved, you can spend $1 billion.
I believe so, as long as we do it prudently.
Okay.
Right.
The $1 billion is making me sweat a little bit.
It's a
on the record. We're talking about $296 million.
Hypothetical,
so sorry.
And that's about 20% or 22% of the total cost, right?
Right.
So 80% more would be whatever it is.
Right.
That was a hypothetical number. I don't want anybody that's listening, apparently. And I think it was you, Mr. Pearson, when asked the question by, I think, Commissioner Thomas, you know, number of customers from dual state, you know, how that helps finance these big generation projects. And thinking about that, so regardless of whether the utility-owned solar or it's third party or it's no party, somebody gives it to you, that still applies, doesn't it? I mean, the number of customers through dual state, those costs are spread out, you know, whether it's a...
Yeah, I would argue that in almost everything that we do, everybody who participates in the dual state system benefits from their participation in it.
Okay, and I understand that. So my point being is whether it's utility-owned, third-party-owned, or whatever, that statement still applies.
That is true, yes.
And this is the engineer coming out in me.
Okay.
And y'all can criticize it profusely if you want to. I'm used to that. You talked, Mr. Pearson, earlier about the ability to charge storage overnight. Your technology's not there, but if it was, then that'd be great. We'd like the flexibility to get it. And I was thinking about Bad Creek. Well, you know, that might be one of them that exists now. But
yeah.
all that said, thinking about the solar paired, again, whether it's third party or whether it's utility owned, from a, I hate to say operations point of view, but is that considered base load?
Solar?
Base load generation, solar paired?
No.
No.
But solar pair does have a higher capacity value.
I get it.
Right.
I understand that.
No.
And because I understand I absolutely understand the absolute value of 24/7, 365. No one else does. I promise you I do. Man, I get it. But thinking in terms of that, whether it's solar or solar paired, and you do have, hopefully you have that storage.
Yeah.
How does it function? I mean, what is the value it brings in let's say instead of August, it's a hot day, the sun's out and all this kind of stuff, but it's, I can't remember what year it was, but I remember being out of power about six days. Just one of those things that happen. Ice, really, really cold. Sun didn't shine. I felt like I was in Alaska with 30 days a night. How would that be used in that critical situation?
Solar. So you're talking about a winter event, not a summer
Well,
event?
that particular one.
So, we agree that there is an incredible import on baseload generation, right? I mean, it's the core component of our system, right? We need 24/7 energy. We need energy that we need to be able to generate electricity irrespective of what the weather does, right? And so, we think that solar is a great pairing resource, but not a great, resource to build upon which to build your system. Winter. I think people would be surprised to think that sitting here in Columbia, South Carolina, which has embraced, for whatever reason, the motto of famously hot, that we would be a winter peaking system, right? They wouldn't. I don't think that is something that is, just would be understood, right? And a big part of the reason why is because of solar, right? The way that we construct our system, and that the early mornings are worse in the winter. That's where people use more power, right? They turn their heat on, the businesses start, and in the summer it's the afternoons, right? The early evenings, people are getting home from work. The sun's been beating all day. Things have been working. Air conditioning's been running. It's just a way that power usage happens. And so in the summer, solar has been running all day and is on the system, and those batteries can store it, and it's producing, and it doesn't exist between 4 and 10 a.m. on a winter morning. And so you are absolutely right that these assets as they exist right now, if that winter situation happened again, would not, other than Bad Creek, which is tremendous, which can, store for a long time, would not be part of the solution to that problem. And that is why I think you go back to the IRP, which is how does this whole thing work together, right? And that's why in IRP we have, and you all approved, significant amounts of investment in gas, right? But we're also focused on the affordability side of things, and it's why our system dispatches energy on a way of like least cost first, right? So we don't want to use the gas when we have the solar because gas costs our customers more. So that's why we need it all, right? In order to have a reliable system that costs the least for our customers, this is what we believe is the way to do that. And so they all have value, and they have different value, and they have different value at different times of the year and different times of the day, and under different circumstances.
And you talked about the technology if it became available.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that too. Like, of course, that's not my strength by a long shot, but other than hydro or something that can just do it anytime, when it's running. Unless it can absorb electrons like Wi-Fi, I'm not sure either. But if it did become available, whatever that might be, the utility could pursue that technology on its own or then, correct?
Right. I think, the way I would do it is we could pursue it in concert with the commission, right? But we could bring something to you and have that conversation. If we believe that technology is in the best interest of our customers and our system. If we believe that technology is in the best interest of our customers and our system, we cannot make the third party group do it, and nor can you, right? They exist outside of our ownership opportunity to influence how they do things, and they exist out of the oversight of this commission. So the only way
Go ahead, finish.
Yeah, so once we sign a contract with them, that contract exists under the terms that it was signed and doesn't account for technologies that heretofore do not exist, right? So that's
I understand, and I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
When you said that, but I was thinking about this hypothetical technology that if it existed, and if it was, if it worked, would it really matter whether a third party would do it or not, or whether solar would do it or not? If that technology existed, you could put it anywhere, anywhere on the grid, independent of. I'm not sure that. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure whether it's paired with solar or not would really
so
matter.
I was specific. Yeah, that is true. If there is a new technology that doesn't relate to solar, then that would be different, and we would do that. I was specifically talking about solar because we have an example of where we've added storage to that. But yes,
I got it. I went off the cliff on that because that's the way I was thinking.
It's a good cliff. I think we all hope the technology.
When you and I'll
continues to
figure that
evolve.
out,
Yeah,
and we'll quit our day jobs.
Yeah.
When we do.
This is a great example of this, right? Where, a while back, this commission approved the Robinson Solar Project, and that project was on our land. It was at a facility land that we already owned, and in that area, because we owned that greater project, we were able to add solar technology to it for the benefit of customers. And so I think there's other analogies there for what we can do going forward. And it is all of the above. We're talking about solar and solar paired with storage, but we've also got dockets in front of y'all for standalone storage. We're going to be talking about natural gas next week. And so it is part of this all of the above approach.
I understand. And the final two questions, I promise, because I can't remember who responded to, but you were talking about the difference in laws, the plain reading of the law, the plain, in your opinion, the plain reading of North Carolina law. I got to tell you, I'm not familiar at all with the North Carolina law. It could be in Greek, it could be in Hebrew. I have no earthly idea what it says. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I appreciate that. Because what our job here is to focus on South Carolina law, right? And I believe that that's what we've done. So I appreciate it.
And this is not a trick question. It's a sincere, well, all of them have been. And thinking about that reasonable balance we've talked about all week, well, not all week, but the times we've been here. And, going back and looking at Act 41 and the sections in 58, 42 and such. Does South Carolina law, as is, define what that is anywhere?
Reasonable balance, not with a prescriptive number, no.
And I think that's one of the things we addressed in our comments. There is some subjectivity there, but going from the plain reading, reasonable balance, we went to Webster's, which sometimes is what you do when you don't have a defined term. And we included that definition in our comments, but reasonable balance, approximately half and half. The Webster's definition talked about reaching an equilibrium. And so while we don't have a specific percentage in South Carolina law, the fact that North Carolina does, I don't think inherently makes what we brought to this commission unreasonable.
And I would just, if you don't, or I'll let you ask. But
No, please.
So, the way that I understand ORS is to have interpreted the idea that there is not a specific number in there is that we should just not have a target at all when we start this RFP process. And I was thinking about that. I mean, honestly, I can't think of a single thing that I do in my professional life where I don't set some target on the front end to achieve some outcome on the back end, right? Like, I don't want to treat my professional life like I'm Forrest Gump and I just start running and, end up in the Pacific Ocean, 6 months later. Like, you have to know where you're trying to get in order to get there, right? So the idea that we would set an RFP with no target at all and just hope it ends up in a reasonable balance, I don't even know how that works.
Yeah, but look at all the cool stuff Forrest Gump did.
That's true. I mean, I may enjoy that run, but I just think you have to set a target if you're going to get to a place. And we don't set a reasonable balance necessarily now because we just think. I mean, we do think it's good. The General Assembly told us to, so we got to find a way to get there.
Well, based on listening to Mr. Salter's response and reading the information we had and all currently, as is.
Yeah.
It's I don't remember the exact percent. 65 plus or minus something percent. If it were opposite of that, hypothetically, if it were 35 owner-owned, 65, would that be reasonable?
So I think if we're talking about the actualities of what the RFP produced as opposed to the targets that were set, because they're two different things, right? The targets and what ultimately comes, they're just targets, and what comes out comes out. Yeah, I mean, a part of it, and Heather might have a better job of answering this, it's the reasonable balance we see as an aggregate on the system, right? So it's not specific to every single RFP, right? We're trying to get to those positions. I think that these are targets that we're trying to get to, and if the RFP produces results that are somewhere in the ballpark that are in the best interest of our customers, then yes. But.
Yeah, I would also say I think it depends on what were the factors that caused the percentage to change from the target. Here you have a higher percentage of utility owned because we had third parties drop out. I think you could wind up another day where there might be third parties on the utility owned track, or maybe we discovered some difficulty with a self-developed project that means we can't move forward. And in that situation, you might wind up with a higher percentage of third party owned versus utility owned. So I think you set that target, you work your best to get to it, and then there are forces beyond anyone's control, except the entity making a decision about whether they move forward with that or not. That's why the process is so important. I think that's why there is so much language in Act 41 about how do you get from a quantity in the IRP to the end of a procurement.
I understand, but do you agree that as far as the act itself, I've not seen where it mentions track or target. It just simply talks about reasonable balance and such as.
That's my understanding. Heather has a far greater understanding of what's in the law than I do.
Yeah, it doesn't mention tracks, and that's why I think looking at the policy of having a reasonable balance, in effectuating that policy, it matters how you get there, and we think the 2 tracks is a reasonable way to get there. But it does not have those words. No, it does not.
I would say also that, the track, I think that if you logically take the fact that the Act says that there needs to be a reasonable balance, that's a recognition that the 2 things are different. You don't need a balance of 2 of the same thing, right? And so when you construct an RFP and you have tracks, if they're different assets, which I think the law acknowledges by the fact that, again, it requires a reasonable balance, an RFP that runs 2 different things in the same way is difficult to get a good outcome because it's apples to oranges.
I want to thank you both, and I really want to commend you for pulling those mics close because I could hear every word, and I'm so thankful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Belson.
I want to ask a clarifying question for my edification because I understand that the law doesn't mention tracks, but the RFP is designed in the way that it is with 2 tracks due to our order. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Belson. I'm not going to hold you up long, but just a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. And Mr. Pearson, you made a good point that you don't get to set the policy. You don't get to set the laws. Of course, we don't either, but we have to follow them. And to me, you talk about a reasonable balance. It's not just this, the whole system, you've got to have a reasonable balance. And that's a moving target. I don't think we all expected the demand 5 years ago that we're looking at now at all. One thing I was wondering, we have an independent examiner that evaluates all RFPs. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And maybe what I'm trying to ask is, could an independent examiner, you think, address or allay some of these concerns that ORS has, or that the public has? Of course, they're more, the public's more concerned about the bottom line costs, but the evaluation of utility on is that projects, is that something that an independent examiner could address or help people understand? And if they could,
yeah.
Can you explain how?
Yeah, I think so, and to some degree, the independent, well, actually to a pretty large degree, the independent evaluators report talked about that, actually addressed the difference between utility owned and third party, and he actually explained in his evaluation report that it would be inappropriate to compare the two together because they're different products. So do I think there could be more or a deeper explanation of that? I do. I also think that this is why stakeholder engagement is so important. And so we do really robust stakeholder engagement for these processes. And we've never had an opposition in stakeholder engagement to the dual state track. So, understanding that the commission's more interested, in that, and others are more interested in that, we can certainly evaluate, more express descriptions going forward. I think that's good feedback, but and that's the kind of feedback that we're open to in the stakeholder engagement process.
Well, and I'm not going to hit you with a what if, but I mean, if your costs, if you what is construction or how you run the program or whatever, if they're not reasonable and prudent, that's going to be dealt with at the proper time.
Right. That's correct.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any further commissioner questions? If not, we've been going now for almost 2 hours. We're going to take a 15-minute break. And I'm sorry, is any redirect?
I have no redirect, Mr. Chair, and I would respectfully request that these witnesses be excused from the witness stand.
All right. Well, that's fine. I think they'll probably hang around anyway.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And I apologize for overlooking that. But let's come back here at 11:30, ready to roll.
Thank you all very much.
We're in
Appreciate the
recess.
time.
Good morning again, and welcome back to the South Carolina Public Service Commission. We are still taking testimony in the case 2025-247E. It's my understanding that now, Mr. Rasmussen, you're going to put up your rebuttal testimony.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Chair Powers.
Yes, sir.
My co-counsel, Mr. Holman, has a prior commitment in a few minutes around noon, and he needs to drop off the call then, and we wanted, of course, to inform the chair, but I, of course, will be on to the end.
All right, well, as long as we got you, I'm happy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, members of the Commission. Mr. Salter, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 24 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed in this matter on February 6, 2026, which included confidential and public versions?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you the same questions today as those posed in your rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, I would ask that Mr. Salter's rebuttal testimony be entered into the record of this proceeding as if given orally from the stand, and that the confidential version remain under seal.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony, Mr. Salters, will be entered in the records if given orally from the stand. The confidential version shall remain confidential and under seal unless and until the Commission rules such information is not entitled to protection from public disclosure, or the requesting party agrees that such information is no longer confidential or proprietary.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Mr. Salter, did you prepare a summary of your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
Could you present your summary to the Commission?
Yeah. Let me interrupt one second. Mr. Salters, you were under oath in this case earlier. You're still under oath.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission. My rebuttal testimony responds to Duke Energy's reply comments regarding ORS's review of the company's 2024 CPRE program. In summary, ORS determined that Duke Energy arbitrarily limited competition in the 2024 RFP. Duke Energy set a target of 55% for utility-owned projects and 45% for third-party owned contracted under controllable power purchase agreements to meet North Carolina policy requirements. The ownership targets applied by the companies in Step 1 of the bid evaluation process led to the exclusion of several competitive controllable PPA bids from Step 2 of the RFP evaluation and resulted in the company's selection of higher cost utility-owned track UOT projects. It is important for customers to receive the full economic benefits of competitive procurement. The ownership targets designed to meet North Carolina policy goals limit the competition from PPA bids by insulating the UOT track from further price scrutiny. Furthermore, Duke Energy did not quantify the benefits of utility-owned projects such that a comparison could be made to justify the higher cost UOT selections. The companies acknowledge that they have not analyzed whether those benefits outweigh the additional cost. Without such an analysis, ORS's review identified 3 solar-only projects that were higher cost, were not in the public interest for South Carolina. The company's reply comments would make you believe that ORS is seeking to upstate the dual system apple cart. Nothing could be further from the truth. Rather, ORS's review of the company's 2024 CPRE is grounded in 584220G, the newly enacted by the General Assembly as part of Act 41, which expressly acknowledges and contemplates the reality that the companies operate a dual state system. Act 41 both acknowledges the benefits of a dual state system and at the same time allows for provisions to address differing policies between the 2 states. As such, ORS recommendation followed 584220G by reviewing the results of the 2024 RFP and identifying the procurement results that were not in the public interest of South Carolina customers. Continuing with the requirements of 5820G, ORS recommended the cost and benefits of the 3 uneconomic utility-owned solar projects, Sandhill Solar, Mosley Creek, and Ponderosa Solar Center, be allocated away from South Carolina customers. In conclusion, ORS's review and recommendations are grounded in South Carolina law, actual RFP bids, and basic economic principles. The Commission retains full discretion to determine whether the 2020 RFP procurement results are in the public interest and allocate costs accordingly. ORS continues to recommend denial of Sandhill Solar, Mosley Creek, and Ponderosa Solar Center. Accordingly, the company should file for Commission approval the method and estimated administrative costs for effectuating such allocations. ORS recommends approval of the remaining projects selected by the 2024 RFP. In my rebuttal, I also recommend annual reporting consistent with past 2022 and 2023 CPRE programs. For future procurements, ORS recommends ownership allocation be determined by competitive results and clearly defined factors rather than out-of-state policy mandates. That concludes my summary.
Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, Commissioners, Mr. Salter is available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. Any questions from the company?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Salter.
Good morning.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
We'll jump right in. Mr. Salter, on Tuesday, Mr. Breitschwert proffered the company's responses to ORS discovery request set 4. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
There was an objection on Tuesday because the set did not reflect the company's updated response to DR 4-3. Do you recall that?
Yes, I did.
So I'm going to put in front of you that complete set at this time. Does this look like the complete set of the company's responses to DR 4?
Just objection. This does not appear to be the one that states the corrected responses included. That is included in the top box caption.
Okay.
Unless this has been modified since, I don't know.
I'll continue to validate it then in that case and lay the foundation. So, Mr. Salter, if you would, turn to the 7th page of that document, which is page 3 of the supplemental set of Duke Energy's responses. You'll see a heading midway down that says corrected response, parentheses 1/22/26. Do you see that?
I'm about 1, 2, 3. I'm paid about 4, 5 pages into the exhibit. It's listed page 1 of 4. Date of response January 22nd, 2025. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes, sir. And if you turn to the 3rd page of that supplemental response, which is page 7 of the stack of papers, you'll see about midway down a heading that says corrected response 1/22/26. Do you see that?
Yes, sir. I see that.
Mr. Welborn, can I just clarify that you're saying count in 7 pages? The page is
That's
not
correct.
Is not numbered.
Because
page
this
7.
is a compilation
Right.
of previously provided. Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that clarification, Commissioner. And I'll, in fact, put it on screen. I believe ORS counsel had made an objection. I don't know if it's appropriate for that objection to be formally withdrawn or not. I'll pause for that.
I'm not objecting to this here now. This has the corrected testimony included. My objection on Tuesday was because it was not the most current, corrected, accurate responses. So,
thank you. Mr. Chair, I believe I've laid the foundation sufficiently and would move that this set of discovery responses be moved into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
And I would agree with that, and this will be marked for identification and will be exhibit number 14. It may not be the most current, but we certainly understand that and deal with it as give it what value it has.
Thank you, sir. And to establish that point, Mr. Salter, is this the most current response as supplemented by the companies?
Yes, sir. Based on the files that are here.
Thank you.
That's correct.
And in fact, DR response to 4-3 was discussed on Tuesday in particular as being out of date on Tuesday, but it's since been updated and supplemented, and this is the supplemented response. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question. This response was updated on January 22nd.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
So that was inartfully put by myself. But in any case, this
Glad
is
to
the
help.
most current version of this DR response. Is that right?
That I'm aware of.
And so
Yes,
we're
sir.
looking at our response to DR 4-3. In that response, the companies, in their corrected response, confirmed that the IRP modeling validated that the portfolio was cost effective and that the cost effectiveness was further verified by 2025 IRP update modeling.
Do you want me to read this?
We can read it, or you can just agree with my sort of quick summary. I'll leave that to you.
It's the corrected response says current modeling provides sufficient confirmation that the resources are cost effective and the companies view that as optimal. And the modeling, I think, is referring to the IRP. The resources in the cost range were selected in the company's expansion planning model in the 2023 IRP and then confirmed by the recent modeling that supports the 2025 IRP update. The companies also note that the company's 2024 RFP bid evaluation team adhered to the bid evaluation process set forth in Section 7 Proposal Evaluation to the 2024 RFP to determine the highest ranked, lowest cost portfolio of projects to meet the RFP target volumes of solar and solar paired with storage resources in each track. The bid evaluation process established in the 2024 RFP allows for a comparison within each project track. Of the weighted average cost of the highest ranked bids with the generic resource cost included in the company's modeling. That said, the companies have confirmed that the weighted average LCOE of the contracted solar projects is 1% lower than the solar reference cost, which is based on the baseline generic cost from the company's modeling. In summary, the company's modeling confirms that the results of the procurement, namely the selection of the solar only and solar paired with storage SPWS resources from the 2024 CPRE, is cost effective.
Thank you, Mr. Salter. Also on Tuesday, Commissioner Belzer had asked a question, which was whether ORS objected to the way that the RFP was designed or structured. Do you remember that question?
Yes, I believe so.
At first, you responded that ORS didn't want to rewrite the company's processes. Do you remember that?
Yes, I think I generally remember that that we did not disagree with the two-track process, like splitting up the two tracks.
The quote that I wrote down watching the video back was that you or ORS did not want to rewrite the company's processes. Does that sound right?
ORS does not intend to manage the company. That's correct.
objection. You already answered this question on Tuesday.
I'm just refreshing and laying the foundation for what follows, Mr.
Keep
Chair.
it moving.
Yes, sir. following that, you said that the companies should not have separate procurement tracks that target a certain amount of either utility-owned resources or third-party PPAs. Is that right?
I think we were sort of having a conversation, and where we got to was that the issue is the 55%, 45% targets that are applied to the different tracks.
So fundamentally in ORS, in 2026, now in February, ORS does believe there should have been changes or should be changes to the procurement. Is that right?
The issue with the target, the 55%, 45% utility-owned PPA targets were identified in the 2022 CPRE proceeding. They've been identified in the 2023 IRP proceeding, and they've also been identified in one of the consumer renewables dockets that we've filed comments in. So this isn't the first time this issue's come up.
Is there anything in Act 41 that would change your view on these matters? I mean, that was a transformative piece of legislation. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Act 41 was a large piece of legislation. I would agree with that. Transformative. I don't know about transformative, but it was a large piece of legislation.
That's fair. And I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, but would you agree that the Energy Security Act made certain changes to how the General Assembly looks at policy on procurements that come before this commission?
Yes, it revised the CPRE procurement statute specifically, where before the commission was not required to approve these procurements, and essentially approval was for more of a rate making proceeding. It entered in a number of statutes, but specifically the one we reviewed here and the one the company filed its application under was 584220G.
And you mentioned that the 2022 and 2023 RFPs were largely structured the same way as the 2024 RFP. Is that right?
I believe the company has applied lessons learned relative to the 2022 and 2023 CPRE proceedings. I know it's been mentioned that the power purchase agreement documentation has been made more robust since sort of some of the initial CPRE tranches, and additionally, I believe some of the security requirements that the company's requiring of third parties have been revised so as to avoid as much attrition as has occurred in the past.
Were you here for my oral argument on Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
Did you see the slide after slide of the company's references to reasonable balance and a balance of ownership raised by the companies in this prior dockets?
Yes, sir. I heard you mention reasonable balance, and yes, that's correct.
And there was a dual track RFP design intended to achieve that reasonable balance in the 2022 and 2023 CPREs. Is that right?
Under this proceeding, the ORS didn't review this request in terms of reasonable balance because the company filed under 5820G, which the reasonable balance language doesn't apply to.
In the 2022 and 2023 CPREs, would you agree that the company sought a reasonable balance of ownership as between utility-owned projects and PPA projects?
Objection, relevance.
It's relevant, Mr. Chair, because the design of the 2024 CPRE is nearly identical, at least in this way, as to those prior CPREs that the Commission has previously approved.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection. You can answer.
Could you repeat the question, please?
The question is simple, and that is, did the 2022 and 2023 CPREs have a dual track procurement design intended to achieve a reasonable balance of utility owned resources and PPAs?
I'm not sure. I don't recall reasonable balance being explicitly called out. I am aware that there was the two-track procurement and that those two CPREs included the same 45% targets.
So you don't recall whether the words reasonable balance were used in those prior proceedings?
I don't recall, no. I wasn't a witness.
That's fair. That's fine. Would you agree that the 2024 CPRE, as represented by the companies, was designed to achieve a reasonable balance of resources as between utility-owned projects and third-party PPAs?
What the company says in the application the 55%, this is on page 6 of Exhibit 1 to the application, footnote 7. The 55% UOT and 45% controllable PPA targeted allocation aligns with the targeted allocation established pursuant NCGS 62-110.92 and also reflects a reasonable balance of utility and independent third-party ownership of new controllable solar and SPS resources consistent with the company's continued system-wide procurement strategy to serve their customers in both South Carolina and North Carolina.
In other words, to answer my question, it sounds like your answer is yes, the company sought a reasonable balance of ownership in the 2024 CPRE. Is that correct?
The company's targets align with the North Carolina policy. That's what it says. That's what I just read.
Read the second half of that sentence again, Mr. Salter, please.
Starting where?
I don't have it in front of me. The part that refers to a reasonable balance of ownership.
Also reflects a reasonable balance of utility and independent third-party ownership of new controllable solar and SPS resources consistent with the company's continued system-wide procurement strategy to serve their customers in both South Carolina and North Carolina.
Thank you, sir. And so it's your testimony that ORS does not want to blow up, to use a term of art that was used earlier in this proceeding, doesn't want to blow up, doesn't want to change the RFP design, but it does want to change the outcome of that procurement. Is that correct?
Our concern when we reviewed this procurement and we reviewed the cost effectiveness of this procurement and we reviewed the responses that the company gave us in discovery is that based on the 55-45% target that was overlaid at the beginning of the procurement or towards the beginning of the procurement in step 2, several controllable PPA projects were excluded from the full evaluation in the procurement, which could have provided customers with a more cost-effective resource.
I'm going to ask a yes or no question this time. Yes or no? Does ORS want a different outcome of the CPRE results than what the companies have put forth?
Well, I mean,
yes or no?
I don't know
Mr.
if
Salter?
I'm confused about the yes or no because, I mean, yes, in that our recommendation was to allocate cost of these 3 projects away from South Carolina customers. Is that what you're asking?
My question is whether ORS would essentially want to change the procedure by which the companies carry out their procurement. I mean, that seems to be what ORS's position is, isn't it?
ORS recommendation ORS recommendation is the companies be required in future CPRE solicitations to evaluate the reasonable balance of ownership of eligible facilities based on South Carolina law without regard to another state's jurisdictional policy or law prior to evaluating competitive prices.
And rephrasing that recommendation for the commission, that is fundamentally a change to the RFP design and how it's carried out. Isn't that correct?
The issue that we identified was the 45% limitation that's applied at the beginning of the RFP.
So yes.
Minimize competition. So to the extent that you're asking, do we take issue with the way the 45% was applied within the evaluation? The answer is yes.
And the 55-45 was also represented as a reasonable balance in the company's direct exhibit. Is that correct?
Could you refer me? You're talking about the footnote I was reading?
Exactly.
Yes, that's what the company stated in the footnote. ORS requested for the company to provide a quantitative justification for why higher cost utility projects, where the benefits outweighed the cost to South Carolina customers, and the company was not able to provide a quantitative justification.
Thank you, Mr. Salter. We're going to turn to the company's DR set 1, which I'll put in front of you. I guess first, does this look like an accurate reproduction of the company's responses, or rather, excuse me, of ORS's responses to the company's first set of discovery?
This looks like a discovery response to discovery number 1.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd ask that this set of discovery responses be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
The set of discovery responses as presented will be entered into the record as exhibit number 15.
15, thank you, sir. Mr. Salter, on page 3, we'll start there. I'll give you a minute to turn to page 3. We're going to look at DR 1-5. In fact, why don't I get that on the screen? Do you have that in front of you?
1-5, that's correct.
Yes, sir. And in that request, the companies asked whether ORS considered certain qualitative benefits to utility ownership. And that question included 5 considerations that the companies enumerated in their request. Those are reliability, aligning asset ownership with the obligation to serve customers, commission oversight, streamlined asset decommissioning, and adaptability to future technology changes. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
In ORS's response, it said yes, period, that ORS had considered those benefits. Can you tell me, Mr. Salter, specifically how ORS considered and weighed those benefits?
Well, we acknowledge that the company asserted that those benefits, but we asked the company to quantify what those benefits, how those benefits provided benefits to South Carolina customers, to try to balance the cost of the higher utility owned projects to determine that the benefits outweigh the cost. And we weren't able to quantify those benefits.
Yes, sir. And our question was whether ORS had considered those qualitative factors. And ORS's response was yes. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
So how did ORS specifically consider and weigh those benefits?
Well, I don't know if we weighed the benefits, because we didn't have any we didn't have any quantitative data to weigh the benefits with from the company.
So
We
ORS took
considered
an-
the benefits and we took them under consideration, as we reviewed the discovery responses and performed our review of the application.
How did you take them under consideration?
Well, without any numbers to analyze, we took them into consideration in a qualitative manner. These are general statements. I don't think that we necessarily objected to any of them, so we acknowledge that company ownership provides these benefits, but we weren't able to quantify, what those benefits actually conveyed for customers relative to the higher cost.
That's fair. And so there are meaningful qualitative benefits that maybe aren't able to be captured in a quantitative analysis. Would you agree?
I don't know if I'd agree with not possible, but we were not able to capture them.
Okay. Thank you. Let's turn to page 7 of this set of responses. And I'm going to look at DR 1-14. In that DR, we asked ORS how. I'm sorry. are you-
DR.
Yes.
I
On
thought
page-
you were at 1 dash. What number are you at?
Yeah, on page 7, I'm on DR 1-14. Are you there?
I'm on DR 1-14.
Okay, thank you. We asked in that request how ORS would propose to balance cost considerations with things like reliability and operational control. Do you see that?
Explain how ORS proposes that the company should balance cost considerations with other factors such as reliability, operational control, and system integration in future procurements.
So we're in the same place, it looks like. In ORS's response, it said that it didn't make management or operational decisions for the public utilities. Do you see that?
That's correct. ORS does not make management or operational decisions for the public utilities.
Is that ORS's way of saying not my job?
I think our position is that we don't make management or operational decisions for the public utilities.
So when asked how ORS would propose to balance cost considerations with things like reliability and operational control, that isn't something that ORS would take into account?
Could you repeat the question, please?
When asked how ORS would balance things like reliability with cost considerations, is it ORS's position that it's not its job to make those considerations?
ORS takes reliability very seriously and is always considering reliability when we review all requests that come in front of the commission.
In other words, it is, and tell me if you agree with this or not, but it is ORS's job to balance cost considerations with things like reliability?
Well, ORS represents the public interest in front of the commission, and reliability is certainly part of the public interest.
Does ORS take into consideration other parts of Title 58, including policy statements by the General Assembly?
I believe we take into consideration all statutes that apply under each specific request.
Subject to check, would you agree that ORS said 9 different times in this set of discovery responses that it's not its job to make management or operational decisions for utilities? Does that sound right?
You're referring to the statement that ORS does not make management or operational decisions for public utilities?
That's correct.
I don't know if I can confirm the number of times, but
More than once, would you say?
probably more than once.
Thank you. Let's turn to page 10 of these discovery responses. And this is DR 1-25. We asked ORS in this discovery request how solar energy has helped the companies to meet summer peak demand, which is a reliability matter. Do you see that?
No. What number? You're at 110?
I'm sorry if I misspoke. This is page 10. We're looking at DR 1-25.
I'm at 125.
Yes. So we asked ORS how solar energy has helped the companies to meet a summer peak demand, which is a reliability matter. Do you see that, DR?
Let's see. Is ORS aware of how solar developed energy has helped companies meet summer peak demand? If so, please describe ORS's understanding of the issue. You see that?
Do you agree that meeting peak summer demand is important?
Meeting peak summer demand is important.
ORS objected to that, DR. Does that look right?
That's correct.
Is it ORS's position that rejecting 168 megawatts of new generation has no relevance to reliability?
So what we reviewed was whether the cost of the projects were in the public interest of South Carolina customers. The projects were shown to be less cost effective than other bids that were available, and we recommended the commission allocate those costs away from customers.
Not only the cost, Mr. Salter, but also the benefits of that generation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So 168 megawatts of new solar generation, ORS proposes to reject from South Carolina's balancing authority area?
I'm not certain exactly how that would occur, rejecting it. I don't think the commission is rejecting it from the balancing area authority. I think they're in our recommendation would recommend allocating the cost away from South Carolina customers.
Cost and the benefits.
That's
Thank you.
correct. Cost and benefits.
And one of those benefits is energy to the grid. Wouldn't you agree?
One of those benefits is energy to the grid. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And do you think it would be a positive outcome or a negative outcome if renewable energy credits from those resources were not available to the state's economic development customers?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that the company has renewable energy credits available to it to provide to economic development customers. I know that this procurement continues to, even with ORS's recommendation, would provide several hundred megawatts of solar resources that the full cost and benefits would be allocated to South Carolina customers. So I'm not sure I understand the risk that you're referring to.
You mentioned a moment ago that ORS pays attention not only to its public interest statutory mission, but also other aspects of policy as issued by the General Assembly. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Did you consider economic development in making your recommendation to reject these megawatts of new solar?
ORS doesn't have economic development in its mission, so we were considering the public interest of the using and consuming public.
Sure, but just moments ago, you mentioned that ORS also took into consideration other policies issued by the General Assembly, not only its statutory mission. Is that still accurate?
That's still accurate. Mm-hmm.
And so did you consider economic development when you made these recommendations to reject this 168 megawatts of new solar?
I don't know if economic development is mentioned in our comments, but I personally don't see a risk to economic development from allocating these projects away from South Carolina customers.
Yeah, that's fine. Did you hear Mr. Pearson's and Ms. Smith's testimony just a few minutes ago?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn to DR 1-27, and it crosses pages, so this will be tricky on the Elmo, but we'll do our best. The start of the question there talks about a reliability standard that's NERC TOP-001. Are you familiar with that standard? I guess I'll start there.
I'm not a system operator, so I couldn't tell you exactly what was in that standard.
That's fine. And so the question goes on beyond its reference to the NERC standard to say, how does ORS value the flexibility to dispatch utility-owned solar with no limits to non-reliability versus reliability curtailment? Do you see that question? I'm not going to ask that question of you, but do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
And ORS objected because it sought legal advice. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
ORS also objected because it presented an improper hypothetical. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And then there's this line again that we talked about earlier about ORS not making management or operational decisions on behalf of the utility. Do you see that?
Yes, sir. The very last sentence.
Is reliability important to ORS?
Reliability is important to ORS.
And it's a consideration in the commission's evaluation of this procurement. Wouldn't you agree?
How do you, reliability, yes, in section G, you mean?
That's right.
Yes. Let's see if I can get the words exactly right. I'll misquote it.
If the commission finds that the procurement is in the public interest and enables the economic, reliable, and safe operation of the grid. Does that sound right?
That sounds correct.
All right, thank you.
But what was the question?
The question was whether ORS values reliability in the context of its recommendation to reject 168 megawatts of solar.
Yes, ORS values reliability. That was one of y'all's replies, or one of the company's replies to our comments. For these specific projects, my rebuttal on page 21, you sort of look at the reliability. Look at the reliability of the projects under the context of the company's most recent effective load carrying capability study. And in my testimony, I really focused in on the winter capacity. And it's probably just because I was thinking about Winter Storm Elliott and the challenges we had there, and was thinking about how much. So also thinking about the risk. What's the risk of allocating the benefits and cost away from South Carolina customers? Well, found that, when we look at the actual winter firm dependable capacities resources is 3.78 megawatts to the system.
And you noted earlier that summer peak demand is also an important reliability consideration, didn't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Last set, on page 2 of these DR responses, we will look at the company's request 1-2 and ORS's response. Are you there?
1-2? Yes, sir.
Yeah, and down at the bottom, there's reference made to Excel file EPET version, and I won't read all of this, but do you see that Excel file that's referenced?
That's correct.
And in that file, ORS purports to have compared the LCOE of utility-owned projects that ORS proposes to reject against certain third-party PPA LCOEs. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that is the subject of the table at the bottom of page 4 of your rebuttal testimony. Is that right? It's a table that compares the LCOEs that you arrived at in this Excel file. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Salter. Mr. Chair, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from Sasiba?
No questions for Sasiba, Chair Powers, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. Any commissioner questions? Commissioner Bells.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Finley, in some of your responses to questions from counsel for Duke, you indicated that the projects that ORS recommended not be allowed were less cost effective than other, and I kind of lost track writing. Tell me what you mean by cost effective. Are you just looking at the costs themselves, or explain cost effective, how you're using it?
Yes, I mean, well, effectively, we are looking at the LCOE. We are looking at the unit cost of the project spread over the lifetime of the project relative to the agreed LCOE of the 25-year PPA. To the extent that the utility-owned projects could provide additional benefits, during our review, we were open to take that into consideration, but we weren't able to quantify the actual benefits of the utility-owned projects to say, like, and I'll try not to talk in confidential information here, but, you know, when you see such a drastic difference in the cost of the selected utility-owned projects and the selected PPAs, and the company says there are these benefits to utility-owned projects, during our review, ORS was attempting to grapple with how can those benefits be quantified, and that's what we're asking of the company, to quantify those benefits. I think about EEDSM programs. We would look at cost effectiveness. You take into consideration benefits and you take into consideration costs. While this RFP didn't necessarily look at these projects like an EEDSM program will look at its programs, we are trying to consider, is there some benefit that we're missing that would help normalize these utility-owned project costs to the PPAs?
And I don't want to, I'm trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand how you're using it. And am I correct that when you say less cost effective, it's primarily using the LCOE?
That's correct.
Okay. And you made a statement, you indicated without any numbers to analyze, because I had a question now. What are you looking for as far as quantitative evaluation?
Mm-hmm.
And then in response to a question, you indicated without any numbers to analyze.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what and I don't have to do your calculations. So is that what you're needing? You're needing some kind of numerical values for benefits to be able to analyze? And if it's not, that's fine. And if it is, that's fine. I'm just trying to understand.
I think in the context of this review, trying to understand why the costs were so much higher, having numbers, having values would have been helpful. What the company provided as far as the benefits of utility-owned resources were broad benefits, hard to verify, hard to validate, just general statements. So when we seriously reviewed this and took it under consideration, it would have been helpful to have numbers, quantitative analysis. Okay. That's the world we live in. But backing up, what we found during our review was that due to this limitation, this ownership limitation that was applied on the front end in step one of the evaluation, several competitive PPAs were excluded from further evaluation in the RFP.
Okay, and those were in the same track? Those were in the ownership track?
No, they were in the PPA track.
Okay, that's you mentioned how you look at EEDSM and cost effectiveness, and there are certain cost benefit tests in EEDSM. Do those tests also apply to this? Or are you aware of any kind of cost-benefit tests that apply to renewable?
No, ma'am.
procurements?
I was just referring to that sometimes you take into consideration benefits that aren't just, the dollar value that you're signing the contract for, right? So that's just my context of EEDSM.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Finley. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, and officially good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If approved as is, and I don't remember the exact number, but what is the utility-owned third-party percentages in this instant case, as is?
I believe, as it's currently proposed, is 64% utility-owned, 36% controllable PPA.
And that's what's proposed.
That is proposed by the company.
And thinking about reliability, because I was hearing the discussion going back and forth, and reliability can mean different things to different folks, but I'm thinking in terms of a utility, in this case, an electric utility, the electric utility. How does ORS look at reliability? Is reliability from ORS's view, or the way it's viewed, consider the worst conditions the resource will experience? How does ORS view what reliability is?
First of all, Commissioner, just sort of stepping back, I would expect the company to operate a system in a way that would not discriminate against South Carolina customers in a reliable manner, whether certain projects are allocated away from South Carolina customers or not. And thinking about reliability, let's think about all these processes we sit through in this hearing room. Starting with the IRP, we review the resource adequacy study. We review the planning reserve margin that the company puts forward in the IRP to ensure reliability on the system. The company sets its plan to that planning reserve margin and plans its resources accordingly. So step one, when we reviewed this application, was the goal of the procurement to meet the overall volumes in the of solar that was set in the IRP? That was step one of the. We haven't even talked about that in this proceeding, but the first step in our review was to ensure that the goals of the IRP were aligned. Now, the IRP is not determinative. It doesn't say you absolutely have to procure, though there are some certain aspects of Act 41 that point to the IRP. But that was our first step that we checked, were the absolute volumes. From our perspective, utility-owned power purchase agreement, it really, at the end of the day, reviewing this under 20G wasn't really a requirement for us to look at, because what the IRP says is that you will have 1,500 megawatts of solar by these years. And so what we're looking for is the volume of solar is added to the system consistent with what the plan says it needs. And that sort of brings us back to the ownership split at the front end of this process, which limited competitive resources, which could have been considered through the whole evaluation process.
Okay, and you'd mentioned earlier, thinking in terms of, I think, 168 megawatts.
168 megawatts.
And you'd mentioned, I think, in the back and forth with Attorney Welburn. In your, I think, Sir rebuttal, and I don't remember where. And I think you referenced Winter Storm Elliott.
Yes, sir.
And I guess maybe you'd call that worst conditions at that time or whatever. You never have them. There's always one that's going to be worse, but that one. I understood your rebuttal, you say that from a firm reliability, in other words, during the worst time, when you maybe need something the most, the firm reliability, did you say was 3.78 megawatts? What did you say?
My rebuttal says that these three solar resources combined have a winter firm dependable capacity of 3.78 megawatts.
So what I'm hearing, understanding, is during, I guess, normal days, good days, during the summer, during August, when you talked about having those very hot days, it can be very handy. But when you need it, during those kind of times, the firm capacity is that, 3.78, not 168.
That's correct, during the winter peak.
And that is the reliability.
That's the reliability that the companies plan their system to.
Okay. And there was also back and forth on the 2022 and 2023 CPREs, I think. How did ORS evaluate this CPRE based on Act 41 or previous?
ORS evaluated the CPRE based on the statutory requirements in Act 41 and the provisions which the company applied to, which was 584220G. Act 41 was not in place during the 2022 and 2023 CPREs. Sorry for cutting you off.
That's what I was going to ask you. Not necessarily on 2022 or 2023 CPRE, because that was before Act 41. So you're saying ORS evaluated not on that, but based on Act 41.
That's correct.
I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Vice Chair Williams.
Good afternoon, Mr. Salter.
Good afternoon.
Just want to go through a couple of questions. Appreciate your testimony and your patience and working through us as we go through these questions. I don't think I have many for you. Is it fair to say that ORS can't tell based on their analysis, or you can't tell based on your analysis of the company's CPRE, whether or not the three projects that you're recommending the commission reject, if you will, whether or not they are cost effective and economic in your view, based on the information you have? Is that a fair description of the rub and why you recommended rejecting the three projects, the three utility-owned projects?
That's correct. Based on the information that we have and the costs that are reported of the projects relative to other bids that were available to the program, the projects that we're recommending, we cannot justify the higher costs of the projects, the 3 projects in question, based on the information we had.
Okay. Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to make sure I understand where you're coming from.
Yes, sir.
Holding that position is not the same as definitively stating or finding that the projects are not justifiable or not economical.
Well, I mean, we're reviewing these projects within the context of the RFP. Yeah, we're not reviewing these projects in the context of an IRP. We're not thinking about the universe of projects. We're reviewing them based on what was within the 4 boxes of the RFP. Mm-hmm. So thinking about the RFP and the CPRE program, we found these projects were not in the public interest based on the projects that were available to the CPRE program.
Okay. And we may be saying the same thing in a different way. It just seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that that finding is based on what you would describe as a lack of information in order to make a determination.
Based on our review, we found that those projects were selected over lower cost projects based on the 55%, 45% limitation applied in step 1 of the process.
Would it be fair to describe that as a design error in the RFP? I mean, could you not, state it another way, could you not argue, if you hold that position, that the design of the RFP is defective based on the 55-45 split in the beginning?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Okay. So is that, if that's the case, would there need to be any analysis conducted by ORS to find that the RFP was defective if in the beginning, because of the 55-45 split, it would yield an outcome that could potentially result in, and in your opinion, in this case, resulted in projects that were not economic or not in the public interest for South Carolina ratepayers? Like, it wouldn't be, I just want to make sure I'm fleshing out my thoughts here.
Sounds like we're sort of what if and now. I mean, if let's say there wasn't this limitation on the front end, and if these projects were allowed to, the several projects that were excluded were allowed to continue into step 2 of the process, be properly studied, in regards to interconnection costs and any necessary network upgrades on the transmission system, and be fully evaluated as far as their non-price factors. And it came out at the end of the day that they were at the bottom of the pack. Non-price and price factors applied. Yet there was still the 55 issue. I think we would still point out the issue with the 55%, 45% limitation on the front end. However, we would probably not have found that the specific results of this procurement were not in the public interest. And what we were looking for is the results of the procurement, were they in the public interest? I think that's sort of where you were going at when you were talking about the program versus the results.
Yes, you're exactly right. Based on what I'm hearing, there is an issue with the design,
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you taking the thought exercise all the way to the end, where even if the outcome would have been different, your testimony is you still would have pointed to your issues with the RFP design, but hypothetically speaking, if the outcome would have been different, you would have supported approval if you felt the outcome was in the public interest, even if you disagreed with the design in the beginning.
If a full evaluation supported that the price and non-price factors fully weighted, supported that without the limitation of the ownership targets, supported the highest quality, highest scored projects, that would have been, I don't want to say never, because, you never know what you might find when you look under the hood, but, all things being equal, I think that would have been a more reasonable outcome.
Gotcha. So here's where I get a little confused. Before I go down that line of question, let me ask you this. Has anything that you've heard today, earlier today, in the company's rebuttal witnesses' testimony changed your opinion?
No, sir.
Okay. Is it possible that what you are, in your opinion, is it possible that what you're asking from the company, a quantitative analysis, is it possible that that does not exist?
It's possible, but to the extent that you cannot necessarily, that's why you have the non-price factors in step 2 of the evaluation. If the utility-owned projects have intrinsic benefits that are conveyed to the system that PPA projects do not attain, the appropriate place to evaluate those qualitative factors is by setting some type of weighting on those factors in step 2 of the process, where they look at the non-price factors.
So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you there. The rub for me is that we don't have that information. The company has stated their position, and even today testified to what they believe the benefits of utility-owned solar provides to the system and to ratepayers. And I know I want to be very clear about this. I don't want to be accused of burden shifting. It is not your response. You don't have the responsibility of a utility. You don't have to offer up a CPRE program. I understand that clearly. But what's also true, there would be nothing prohibiting you or your office for conducting whatever analysis you believe is appropriate to support the position that the company's RFP as presented is not in the is not in the public interest. I know you don't have to do that, and I'm not suggesting that you do, but what I have before me as I see it is the company saying we've done everything that we could do, and it meets the requirements of earlier commission orders. And then I have you saying that the RFP is not in the public interest because company, you did not provide a quantitative analysis or score, and yet there's no offering of what that looks like. It's like a great unknown. I don't even know how to. I'm building the plane as I'm flying.
And that's why we couldn't. That's why we couldn't. And I mean, I think you're getting at the issue. That's why we couldn't put our arms around how to weigh these benefits, because the company couldn't tell us how to quantify those benefits against a much higher cost. And I just want to clarify one thing. We 3 specific projects that came out of the RFP. We weren't recommending the entire RFP.
Oh yes, sir.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry if if you felt as if I confused the issue. I understand exactly what you're saying. So in order for you to perform your assessment in a manner where you felt the RFP was conducted appropriately or a proper analysis had been done by the company, can you tell me what exactly they would have needed to do?
Well, you said something earlier, and I just want to sort of clarify as well that we didn't consider reasonable balance. We didn't consider the balance of ownership as a requirement in this RFP or in the results therein based on the company filing under 4220G. So we were not undertaking an exercise necessarily to justify, a precise mechanical split of utility owned and PPAs. So absent that, we believe the project should be evaluated, based on a consistent basis. I mean, they're solar projects. They all pay property taxes. They're all in this RFP eligible for production tax credits. They all produce electrons to the grid. They have different owners. They have different term lives. I believe there's ways as far as like comparing those term lives, the 35-year to the 25-year term. Yeah. But I couldn't say up here right now exactly what I'd want to see. However, if just generally when you're comparing 2 bids that have qualitative differences that you can't put a dollar value on, that's why you have 50% of your scoring is in this non-price criteria. So I would have expected to see the benefits that the company's laid out, and I believe they've laid them out in the reply comments, some version of those benefits captured in the non-price scoring, so as to, within the evaluation, within the process, actually weigh those and not just on the front end limit the ownership without justification.
I understand completely, and I want to acknowledge that the job that you and your team has is not an easy one, and I appreciate your ability to answer our questions, and I feel as if you've done so in a very forthright, straightforward way. I understand the position of both your position and the company's position, but I will tell you, we don't have an easy position. We are not in an easy position, even though we understand the positions.
I don't envy your position, sir.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Are there any further commissioner questions? Any redirect? All right. Thank you, sir. Let me step down. Logistically.
Pardon me, Chair. May our witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you.
Logistically, I know we have a closed session we have to deal with. I have no idea what sort of time that will take. Do you have any guess?
We don't estimate that it'll take more than 10 minutes, Mr. Chair.
Would everyone like to go ahead and do that now then, rather than breaking for lunch? Okay. We have to set it up in the back. we'll need a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission go into closed session to hear confidential, well, I think it's been described as highly confidential information.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Then we'll need to clear the room while they set this up.